Okay, good evening, afternoon, or even morning, depending on wherever you are joining us from. Thank you for deciding to spend the next 45 minutes or so with us. Let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Craig Balash. I'm the editor of Emerging Europe. I'm thrilled to be chairing this panel, taking a look at investment in the Emerging Europe region. We've already seen today just how many great companies and innovative ideas are already coming out of the region. Some of them genuinely groundbreaking in the way that they tackle the many challenges and problems of the contemporary world. But like all innovations, they need financial support, they need investment, they need backing. And with that in mind, we've put together a stellar panel, and I say that without exaggeration, it genuinely is, including some people who are really at the cutting edge of, investment in this region. So let me introduce the people who are with me today. First of all, I'd like to introduce Armenia Galcian, who is the Director of Startup Programs and Partnerships at SmartGate VC. Armenia, do you just want to introduce yourself? Tell everybody where you are.
Hi everyone, so I'm based right now in Yerevan. I've been with the fund for over 3 years now. We have invested in 20 companies. We invest in deep tech, AI, cybersecurity, IoT, and looking forward to this panel. Thank you for inviting me. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Alice, would you like to say a few
Sure.
words?
Hi, everyone. I'm one of the co-founders of SeedStars. My name is Elise. Our thesis is really to have an impact in emerging markets by supporting entrepreneurs. So that means kind of a portfolio of activities from providing visibility, network, training, but also, of course, investments. And so now we've invested in, I think, 70 companies across the different continents and looking to shortly be able to invest in over 50 per year as of 2021.
Okay, and Lena Koshani, who's joining us from Horizon Capital.
Hi, everybody. I'm sitting here in Kiev, Ukraine. Very happy to join this esteemed panel. I'm founding partner and CEO of Horizon Capital. We've invested about 750 million in Ukraine and the near region, backed tech companies with about 200 million in investment and brought in about 2 billion to the companies that we've backed.
Okay, and finally we have Marek Dietl, who is the CEO of the Warsaw Stock Exchange, the biggest capital market in the region. He's only with us in voice, but I can assure you it's him behind the photo.
I can confirm that in voice. I'm very sorry that, but we have so nice panelists here, so I think the audience is even better off seeing just my picture, not me live, because this picture, of course, is old. Currently, I'm bald and great parents.
Great picture, Mark. It's a great picture.
Well, as I said, it's a great panel. Their know-how speaks for itself, but this is a panel discussion, so I am actually going to let them speak for themselves. So I think I'll start with you, Lena. I'm a startup in this region, in emerging Europe. I've got a great idea, a great product. What do I do? How do I get your attention? Are you going to come to me, or have I got to come to you?
Okay, so everyone knows that Ukraine, that IT is really has taken off in Ukraine, both startups and the IT industry. So it used to be back in 2003, 110 million. It's over 5 billion. Industry now #3 in terms of GDP drivers in the country. So it's really become a story. And for us, I mean, we're playing through two different funds. Western US Enterprise Fund has that 10 million seed and round A funding. So Craig, definitely, if you're a startup, I would, at whatever stage, I would come to talk to us, and I'll introduce you to Andriy Surkhan over at Western US Enterprise Fund, who does that seed and round A. And then Horizon Capital, we will typically do round A round B and the later stage companies. But we're also looking through our portfolio companies, and just as we see this snowball effect that's in full force across Europe, you do see that snowball effect in Ukraine as well. So you see those strong IT companies, whether they're already product platforms or others, that are backing earlier stage, and then us coming alongside them later on down the road.
Okay, Armenia, I'm gonna come to you now. Perhaps in terms of companies from this region being a bit more proactive, what can they actually do?
Yeah, so if you want to get to know SmartGate, you want to talk to SmartGate about investment, you can do a few things. You can get introduced to us, you can email us. But one of the best things to do is to reach out to SmartGate for the programs that it runs. Apart from being a purely investment vehicle, we do numerous programs such as pre-acceleration program, AI incubation program, and also we do an acceleration program in LA. So if you want to pitch to SmartGate, the best way to do it is to apply to our programs. We are launching 2 programs, one in LA, one in Armenia next week. And I suggest all the companies who are interested in pitching to SmartGate to apply, and we'll jump on a call. We'll be happy to listen to your startup idea, about your traction, your market, and then we'll take it from there.
If I can follow up on that a little bit, how important do you think programs, not just yours, but the programs like this, how important do you think they are? Do you think that they genuinely help companies from making the kind of mistakes that we've heard about a little bit earlier, perhaps?
Actually, in the region, I think it's the existence of such programs is very important, because a lot of times we have very good technological founders, who are building very good technology, but they lack some business skills, or they lack pitching skills. The technology itself is very good, but commercialization becomes very hard because the founders don't have the skills. Having a program such as this one that we run in Armenia, or the one that we run in LA, helps founders to expand outside of their local markets and to talk to investors internationally. So it's I would say programs such as the ones that we run are very helpful for the Eastern European founders.
Okay, Elise, in terms of, seed stars, what is it you're looking for in a company?
I guess like everyone else, so that our portfolio makes sense. But yeah, again, because we're such early stage, we're really looking at the founding team. We're trying to be more smart in the data we collect, because now we have like around 5,000 applications every year across industries. So we're starting to see a sense of kind of these indicators that correlate. But it's really difficult because there's so much you can get out of the soft skills of, do we have the right entrepreneur? We quickly see that there's a potential, a market, a value proposition with the technology, especially us that are also focused outside of CE, where we're looking at markets where the innovation will be much more in the process itself. So it's not necessarily focused only on deep tech, which is sometimes the great technologies you find out of Eastern Europe. But yeah, I think like my other investor colleagues mentioned, and then additionally, we are looking to a certain extent, they're an impact thesis, but we're very pragmatic about it, especially at such early stages. And in the country, we want to help them in due time when they have the maturity in terms of resources and capabilities, and scale at that stage becomes relevant, to support them in building the right monitoring and evaluation framework that is here to help them really continuously look at not only a financial return, but an impact return, which we believe can go hand in hand.
You mentioned people at the beginning of that. I mean, is there a certain person who you're actually looking for? Are there any kind of traits that you can mark out as being, wow, that guy's got it, he understands it, or that that woman understands what this is about?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it does go down to a bit of a gut feeling, or some level of track record or intel that we can get from the ecosystem with regards to this entrepreneur. But that's also the issue, is that we're very much relying on these kind of subjective opinions, and that's where at SeedStars we're reflecting on what are the data, what are the interventions, the types of collaborations we can do where we can have a more systematic approach on kind of defining what is the entrepreneur that's going to make the difference. But it's very difficult. I think in hindsight, what we see is that entrepreneurs over time, where the founding team does stay in the business, is an indicator of success. But it's so, yeah, we can connect the dots in hindsight. How to pinpoint that at a such early stage is much more difficult, and actually for me, an open conversation that I would love to hear from the other panelists.
Okay, Marek, I'm gonna turn to you, and I want to ask you a bit more generally about how the emerging Europe region is viewed, you know, particularly from Western Europe and from the US as well. I mean, for a long time, you know, we've been seen as a purely outsourcing destination, you know, a region that did things for other regions. But that's changing, you know. I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah,
I mean, this is clearly a region that's more than capable now, coming up with great things on its own.
For sure, it's changing. I mean, there were two waves. Early 90s, there was excitement about Central and Eastern Europe, democratization. It was top on the news. They were counting, the business people were counting up the population of the region. But unfortunately, not all the countries performed that well in terms of their economic reforms, and not all of them really developed that a stable market economy and all the institutions around that. So around 1995, 96, the interest of the investors declined. And indeed, it was also, and in fact, it was also related to a massive wave of privatization. Simply, the most interesting companies were very early sold to the foreign investors. So why would you go and hunt for a business there if it's already the cherry picking has already happened? Either foreign investors or local oligarchs took the companies private from the government. Not necessarily under the very transparent conditions, but what was the competitive advantage of the region was actually the supply of talented, hardworking workforce. So the best way is to put your subsidiary there, source the cheap and productive labor force, and no local competition really for the most talented people. And also the only competitor was actually other foreign destination, when many people emigrated alone from Poland. 2 million Poles emigrated from early 90s, and especially just after Poland joined the European Union. And this was the landscape. But it's really changing. In the last few years, it was a dramatic change. I remember when we started the first wave of government support for venture capital in Poland back in 2005, 2006. I was on the board of one of the largest government-sponsored seed funds. It was a 10 million euro fund, so it was small, but for Polish standard at this time it was quite a big achievement. It was a combination of private and public money, and it was very difficult to explain what we are looking for, because all the investors were telling us that it's impossible to find the tech companies down in Poland. We should look for maybe some agriculture ventures or something, because I mean, tech, why looking for tech? And now fast forward this year in October, the second largest IPO in Europe was Allegro, a Polish startup which changed hands for many venture capital private equity firms, and raised 2 billion euros at our venue. So it shows how the economic proportions has changed over the last couple of years.
Okay, Lena, I'm going to turn to you, because you're in Ukraine, and obviously that's a country which, you know, throughout the course of history has probably been known best as, you know, an agricultural destination. And, you know, Marek just mentioned that, you know, we used to have investors looking at agriculture, you know, perhaps industry as well, but now it's, you know, it's very much all about tech. I mean, is that what you see on the ground there in Kiev?
Craig, absolutely. I mean, we like to say that the investment opportunities in Ukraine are brains, hands, and grains. And obviously grains, everybody knows Ukraine as breadbasket of Europe, and we can feed the world. Brains was really something that has come out, of course, by brains, I'm talking about IT programming and IT talent and startups. Hands, of course, is, even now the manufacturing, as companies look to change their supply chain and to look at being closer to the market, that's an opportunity for countries like Ukraine and Poland. But I think the big story is IT. I think it's very exciting. If you look at the unicorns in Europe, over 30 billion, now we have Grammarly, now we have GitLab, now we have People AI that's on its path to become a unicorn. I think IT is the great equalizer, that you can be from any country in the world. You're talented, you're hungry, you're driven, you have great ideas, great products. You can find a way to put that team together, raise funding, and get it into the market. And you can be from anywhere. And I think that's super exciting for the ecosystem here in Ukraine. It's very exciting for the entrepreneurs that we back. And for us, it's all about the entrepreneurs. It's all about the visionary entrepreneurs. And they're not looking at Ukraine and succeeding in Ukraine. They're looking at regional, they're looking at global. One of our companies invested in Jubal. It's the #2 job aggregator site globally. They're not looking at what are we competing, who are we competing with in Ukraine. They're saying that #1 is Indeed, #2 is Jubal. So, going back to one thing that Marek said, it's extremely exciting, Allegro. The fact that this is the second largest largest listing in Europe, and they chose to be in Poland. That is huge. So I think that everywhere I go, it seems that what people want to be talking about is Ukraine, IT, CE, IT, and all these smart people who are really putting and making a name for themselves and our region in the process.
Okay, Elisa, I'm going to turn to you because I just saw you nodding along there a little bit. Particularly when Lena was talking about, how important, entrepreneurs are. So, you mentioned a little bit earlier about how important, people are to the startup and everything. So, I was just wondering if, when you're looking for an entrepreneur, for somebody who's from this region, Marek just mentioned how important it is that companies, think globally when they begin. Is that something you've noticed in this part of the world?
Always
companies do think globally from the outset.
Always depends which where they stand. So entrepreneurs in Nigeria have a big enough market to focus on Nigeria and then consider regional scopes. I remember always being super impressed when I was going to Armenia, how it was from inception that they were thinking globally, because the local market was so small, because the connections with the diaspora were so strong with the United States and other markets, that we really felt that so even their level of the product and the user experience was targeted for US market directly. So that was really interesting to see. And we see that play out across the different continents, depending on the scope of the local market. So how big is the potential consumer base, but also it depends by industry. So some are more easier. So software-based businesses, I think, can more easily become a global company. We focus, as I mentioned before, also in supporting entrepreneurs that have more of a process innovation. So within the agriculture space, it's very offline in the end. Technology is the enabler. There is some level of connectivity and some level of hardware linked to it, but here it's very much a local play to understand, and a local play, but also an objective of kind of integrating the whole value chain. So an example is an entrepreneur in agriculture. We see them scale would mean that they would then take on the responsibility of having the warehouses to have the inventory for farmers from whom they would buy from. And then they would realize that they would be the ones also being the banks in many ways and providing the credit so that the farmers could increase their produce, because that was the only way for them to think of scale as a business. And so where we see these deficiencies in the infrastructure, where public monies did currently not able to have that as kind of a founding right within them to operate in, they build it themselves. And so that's really interesting to see also.
Okay, well, Armenia, I'm going to come to you because, Elise just mentioned Armenia, and she also mentioned the role of the diaspora. I mean, is it something that is a big help for small startups in Armenia?
Yeah, so talking about the Armenian market, so it's clear it's very small. Like you can't build a startup from Armenia, like in Armenian market, that it makes sense for VC investment. But one thing that we always like saying is that we are blessed with a small market. So which means that from the day one, founders understand that they can't build a company for Armenian market. So they
sorry to interrupt, but this really is a theme that's coming across today. It's an advantage to be in a small country. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so So from the day one, they look into the international markets. For Armenia, it's usually the US market. Why is that? Because the investors themselves are very connected to the US market. The diaspora Armenians are diaspora tech Armenians are very connected to Armenia. So the ties with US are very strong. So founders go on to explore US markets more. In addition to that, we also have in Armenia the reason why also I think the companies are very connected to US is because we have strong history of companies being acquired by US companies, like we have in Armenia VMware, we have Synopsys. Both of them came to Armenia with acquisitions of startups, and and these founders, the first generation of the founders who built this company, are currently in the US and are supporting and mentoring the second generation that we are investing in. So this makes connection very strong between the diaspora and the local Armenian founders.
Yeah, I mean that's actually similar to kind of what happened in Estonia, where we've already had a lot of talk about Skype today, but in Estonia they called it the Skype mafia because the people who made money from the first Skype exit were exactly the people who then invested in the second wave of Estonian startups. Yeah. Marek, I'm going to turn to you and change tack a little bit and look at the kind of funding that is available in the region. And, you are the perfect guy to tell us a little bit about the capital markets in this region. And, it's something that, for a few years, I've been saying that, they are criminally underused. And I know that you at the Warsaw Stock Exchange are, really trying to change this at the moment and, trying to make the WSE a regional hub. So are investors beginning to take note of what's on offer in the region's capital markets?
Yeah, definitely. It's the things are changing very rapidly here. First of all, when there is always a dilemma between thin markets, so not enough projects, versus equity gap, so not enough capital to finance the startups, company, and it's very different. This room between free markets and equity gap is very different across the region. Poland is rather at this, or Polish capital market as such is rather at the stage of thin market, so there is more the potential for absorbing the companies than actually the companies than the number of companies to be founded. It's very visible by all stages of investment. We have really booming VC industry. Actually, Polish government is struggling to spend all the money they have, soft money they have for government-supported VCs. We have in Warsaw the second largest VC VC support platform after Berlin. So it's really, really huge. We have by the share market capitalization of listed companies to GDP, and also in the absolute numbers, so both in relative and absolute numbers, the largest capital market, and how the companies from the region can use both this generous VC funding and our public capital market. And just to give you an idea, back in 1990. In Ukraine, on per capita basis, there was 4 times more researchers in the research institute than in Poland. Until 2001, the number of patent applications from Ukraine was greater than from Switzerland. So there's really a huge pool of talents, and it's quite unfortunate that only fraction of the talents are visible to the global investors community. That's why we as a Warsaw Stock Exchange, we are in negotiations of taking the majority stake in the Armenian Stock Exchange, because we see much more talents to be financed down there than the capacity of the capital market to secure this funding. And basically this is the in many countries of the region, the problem is that the average market capitalization to GDP in the region is 17.5%. In Poland is twice as much, 35%, but in Western Europe it's 75%. So we see the issue, or the challenge is how to organize the financing and especially the exits for the companies, for the local companies in the region. Because what we see, like in Hungarian Log Me In, that the companies relatively early go to the foreign markets and they disappear from the region. So we are, as Israel in early 90s, we are very good in starting up the companies in the region, but really the growth phase and maturity of the companies is somewhere else. So first challenge is to keep them in the region, and for that you need capital markets, like the case of Allegro shows that it's possible. And the second thing is also changing the mentality, because on the one hand, this global mentality is great, of course, when it comes to building your business development, sales, and so on, but also like moving too early to large markets like London or New York harm many of the companies. LogMeIn was the example. It was taken private from NASDAQ, as I think LogMeIn too early entered this market, and the private equity took them private because they could not get through to the investors, because in NASDAQ there are hundreds of the companies like LogMeIn, and in Budapest or in Warsaw, if they were listed, for sure they will be visible to the investors community. So keeping the companies longer in the region and giving them opportunity to raise even bigger tranches of money is the key challenge for the region.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there are or have been examples of companies from this region which have listed on NASDAQ, as you say, or perhaps on London, when perhaps they didn't really need to, and they would have been a lot better off choosing a local exchange.
Yeah, definitely local exchange first, local venture firms, then maybe international global venture firms, and through 7 stages, but still keeping to the local roots, and then the first public round in the local capital market. And if really this market becomes too small for them, then moving to NASDAQ, because simply if you are not on the in the top of the chart of the stock exchange, you are not really visible to the investors.
Okay, Lena, I'm going to come back to you. We've heard a lot about the importance of talent in the region and the fact that the region has a lot of talent, but we can't disguise the fact that there has been something of a brain drain. How do you think that we can stop that? What role do investors have in keeping talent in the region?
Yeah, Craig, I think that's a very important question. I think that especially post-COVID, all the countries need to be thinking about this. And we escalated this to the president of Ukraine, that IT professionals, they can take their computer, they can buy a plane ticket, they can go anywhere. There are plenty of countries that are ready to give visas, and plenty of countries that want to bring whole teams and relocate them to other markets. So this is very important. What we see in Ukraine and in our country is 3 things. First of all, there was a Ministry of Digital Transformation set up with a very charismatic minister who's also Vice Prime Minister. He's done a fantastic job over the last year. The guy has implemented Dia, apps for Imalyatko, for, everything that you need once people had a baby to get every single certificate. Digital passports. Now Ukraine is in the top 5 countries for digital passports, for driver's license. Very easy now to register a business. He's made a big declaration that's been supported by the leadership in the country and parliament that in 1 year, the state cannot require a paper copy from its citizens for anything. And let's see if he gets there. That's number one. Number two is this IT regime, this tax regime that is what everyone's talking about. In fact, today I was meeting with the Vice Prime Minister. Tomorrow, Thursday, we'll have another meeting with the whole IT community. And I think that's something that countries throughout our region are going to be looking at. For Ukraine, the way that talents have remained in the country is in essence the 5% tax rate, an extremely low cost of living and an extremely low tax rate, and that catalyzed this industry to grow. And frankly speaking, what we now see, 2 bills in Parliament that essentially capture that over a 15-year period. So 5% taxes, whether you employ people as employees or as contractors, and those are the proposals that are being set up. I think the Ministry of Digital Transformation has done a great job to bring over Denis Olenikov from Belarus, who's working as an advisor to help really kickstart in Ukraine and ensure that we're ready for this post-COVID dynamic, and we'll see what happens. But when you have that support at a ministry level, when you have that support already, Dia City is being talked about as if it's a given, even though it's at the first reading of Parliament, but we expect that it will be implemented before January 1st, and that's pretty exciting. And when you have the president, saying himself that this is a top priority for him, to keep the talents in the region, and he wants those talents to create the unicorns in Ukraine, not elsewhere. And frankly, we see that another point that Marek mentioned was about the early stage funding that was provided by the Polish government. We recently, in the last 2 years, we also did the same thing in Ukraine. It's called USF, it's Ukrainian Startup Fund. I'm also on the board, and it's about 15 million in investment. They're basically grants, 25,000 for pre-seed, 50,000 for seed investments. And it's a grant, something very different that Ukraine has never seen. So about 47 startups so far have received 1.5 million, and the number keeps growing. So the ecosystem in terms of financing is early in Ukraine. At the same time, you see it developing quickly. And I think online, it's going to, that access to accelerators, to incubators, typically you'd have the team leave the country and go to an incubator or accelerator. You can do that online now. Looking at it through Ukrainian Startup Fund, through a list of accredited accelerators that USF will contribute to in order for top startups to attend. And all of them are offering online products now. So I think that's going to help, because that's where you really need that conversion. You really need that conversion and that support to take it to the next level. And we're starting to see it. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, if you can have access to those incubators, accelerators, if you can now do in one day 8 calls with potential VC funds, it's a new world. And people are seeking investment and putting themselves on the radar screen of investors in a different way. And that will continue post-COVID.
Okay, Lisa, I'm going to come to you and, just kind of expand on that a little bit. I mean, Lena there just mentioned COVID, and, I want to ask you if you think that that's had, any kind of impact on the investment climate. I mean, as a journalist, one of the great things about this whole situation has been that, if I need to speak to somebody now, I can get somebody on the phone, almost instantly, because I know everybody's either at home or, they're not going anywhere. I mean, how has it affected, your day-to-day operations?
So yeah, we've been able to indeed continue our commitments in terms of investment, and we'll continue our batches and do our due diligence. We're still figuring out what is the best proxy to, for example, get a sense of the entrepreneur, especially if there is a level of governance have within the structure. So all these elements we're still figuring out and experimenting, but yes, there's I think a lot we can do now, and because everyone has decided that this is the new norm to operate in for the moment, we're much more comfortable to move forward and go straight to the point on the difficult conversations to have. Concretely on our support side, there was a lot of offline and education offline, physical spaces offline, which have been hurt. Entrepreneurs and investees have been more or less hurt depending on how strict the lockdown was in different countries, how much that affected them within their industry. So we had this unbelievable entrepreneur from Ethiopia, which was building this 100% pulp tree-free paper pulp, so that you could and from agri-waste, and basically she was in the final stages of building her factory, so that was a huge halt for such a business. And for others, of course, they're thriving because the pandemic has obliged everyone consumer habits to change at an unprecedented speed. And so when you see the change in terms of learning, so education, healthcare, it's so powerful, because this is where we really talk about scalability and inclusion, especially when we go in such remote areas. So there are huge benefits. Unfortunately, people that are being affected much more than they should. But we as investors stood to our commitment of investing what we wanted to do this year, and we will continue. And I think every investor that I've met with have been able to. It seems as though when you look at the statistics, I haven't seen it in the CE region, but in Asia, it did decrease for the first semester. I don't know if it's going to pick up to as usual or even more. So I haven't looked at the larger statistics behind in like PE investment in these markets.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions that are coming through on the stream from people who are watching us. So I'm just going to put these out to whoever wants to pick them up. The first one is from Sean Elliott. Startup idea: would you invest in super early start R&D to MVP? Is that a yes?
So I can just answer from our side. We usually target companies that are that at least have some kind of MVP, not idea stage, not completely idea stage. But if you have something interesting, you have a strong team, we'll be happy to chat. Yeah. So, but we usually look into companies that are beyond the idea stage. So.
Okay. I've got another one from Alexei Torpakov. What is your view on the development of the capital market of Ukraine compared to other emerging Europe countries? To Lena specifically, that one.
Yeah, I'm actually quite excited about this, because this is something that, you know, I'm Canadian. I've lived in Ukraine for 27 years, and every single year I raise this at every level. I'm also chair of American Chamber of Commerce, so every time you talk to President, Prime Minister, you say capital markets, capital markets, capital markets, and actually it's quite exciting what's happening right now. You know, looking. You know, under this president and prime minister, they're very interested in developing commodities, energy, and capital markets in Ukraine. You know, all the legislation that's been required has been passed. There's a working group already at the prime minister's level, and it's exciting. It's very exciting. So I know it's been a long time in the making. It's been 27 years that I've been here, but I think that there'll be some interesting developments over the next 1 to 2 years, and we do see these kind of Ukrainian champions emerging. I mean, we've invested in the number 1 e-commerce champion, that is Dietl, which is a very, very strong company. You know, e-commerce we haven't even mentioned, but as Elise mentioned, this is the way people have changed their shopping habits. I mean, we're seeing, we've backed 2 other e-commerce, niche e-commerce and online medicine delivery and in beauty products in 14 countries. So, I mean, these are very interesting plays, and look, stay hopeful, stay a believer. I think you're going to see some interesting stuff relating to capital markets over the next year to 18 months in Ukraine.
Okay, we're running out of time, so a final comment from each of you. I mean, just generally, the investment climate in, specifically the emerging Europe region, are we heading in the right direction? Who's going to start?
Well, maybe
Marek, I'm putting you on the spot.
I see the hesitation on your faces. You don't see my face, so I will start. Well, I'm quite worried about Western Europe and US, where some zombie companies still get funding, and this will play out in the next crisis, simply both in the bonds market and equity markets. People will really get disappointed pretty soon. And in this respect, emerging Europe is much healthier because there is still a selection of companies to be invested. So I'm really positive on that maybe the indices are not increasing that fast as in the US. We don't have this and that, but still we have a reasonable economic setup, what will play into our advantage pretty soon. And also we show that we are more agile societies. I can give you one example. As a stock exchange, we also sell data, and we also calculate the Polish LIBOR. So we have clients from Wells Fargo in California to some Tokyo banks globally. Polish zloty market is a global market. So for hedging and so on purposes. And we really struggle with the electronic signature with many of our clients in the Western Europe especially, and also some in North America. So, and we have no problems with our clients in the emerging Europe. They're also buying this licenses. So very simple thing, electronic signature, not sending back and forth papers. It seems to be easier Also, what Lena was telling us about Ukraine, I'm completely surprised because our societies went through so many crises that we can adjust much easier to this crisis than those who were spoiled by the two generation without war and real crisis. I'm not talking about economic crisis because they're still very, very rich. Before crisis, they are rich. After crisis, they are rich. So basically, I'm really positive on this. Also, I see that more and more investors are realizing that. I receive calls from venture funds asking for a meeting to talk about general situation in the capital markets from really top names coming to the region. I see a lot of private equities accounting for the companies. I mean, also more and more for stock exchange. So I think this crisis will strengthen the emerging Europe.
All right, I've just been told we have to wrap up there. So that's a relatively positive note to end on. I thank all of you for joining me, all four of you. It's been wonderful, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you to everybody who watched, and we will be back with you in 5 minutes for the next panel.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.